You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Sterios and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
That podcast that we did 2 or 3 years ago in your sauna at Aroha was a momentous time for me. And now I'm giving you another opportunity here to have a conversation with me and Crystal. And the podcast that we're hosting here is called My Inner Teacher. And we've made a point of inviting people who maybe had a path that was well defined, following a teacher of some kind, until it kind of came to some type of termination where you're put into a situation beyond what you're used to, and you're forced to be creative and move to the sound of your own inner voice. And when I think about Aroha, where you are, and I think about when we had that conversation not too long ago about the processes that you went through, and forever embedded in my mind is this thing about doorknobs now moving forward, and how, we can try and micromanage things, but sometimes it's just about surrender and see where the flow takes. And I want you to start in a way here, just talking a little bit to our listeners about how you found yourself heading down a spiritual path, how you your first, let's call it your first job in the spiritual wellness industry, and then how that carried you into where you currently are.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I genuinely got excited this morning. I was like, "Ooh, I get to talk to Peter." So, it's so good to see you again, and good to be here with both of you. I guess the real transition, the really clear jump in terms of career happened when I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I wish we could just flash up a photo of Damian in Scottsdale days versus Damian now.
Ponytail?
Similar look, but really cleanly shaven, really short hair, um, shirt and tie every day, driving the fancy car, and a consultant for mid-tier technology companies building enterprise-level web sites. So basically went to school for information technology and business, and kind of following, my dad's sort of professional motivations, and getting the right job, or the job that would make good money, and create the sort of right future that he had instilled in me. And so I was doing that for a few years after college, but really being worn down by it. It was like a death of 1,000 cuts. And I really remember just this slow, gradual process of going, God, this just can't be it. It was day after day of just misery. I literally think back to those years, and I can't quite figure out why anyone paid me to sit there in that chair or in that cubicle, because I can't imagine that my productivity was much above zero. And I really hope for myself now that I have a business with staff and, people that are also sitting there, I really do my best to kind of create vision and create inspiration in this business, because I just didn't have it there. It was just nothing. And so I really clearly remember walking around one particular company, great company, nothing wrong with it. But I was walking around looking at different jobs, thinking like, I need to find something, some role. I'm willing to go back to school. I'm willing to go do an MBA. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to find something that fills my passion cup. And I really couldn't find anything in that business. I looked behind this door and this administrator and that executive, and I couldn't find it. So I really was like a true seeker. I was open to anything and desperate. And it took about 2 years. And I eventually, one of my friends knew I was a bit desperate, and he said he was working at a retreat center out in Los Angeles, my good friend Chalo. And he said, why don't you just come out here? Just come spend a week, like come hang out. And I went from, if you know Scottsdale, like all the roads are straight, all the lines are perfect. It's a very kind of clean, orderly, city. And it's just quite, I don't know how to.
Manicured.
Yeah, how do you say that? I mean, yeah, manicured. How do you say that kindly? And it's a beautiful city and it's amazing and great restaurant and all sorts of things. But it's one way. And I dropped into Topanga, California. And Topanga, California, if you haven't been there, it's barefoot, and it's long hair and it's in ponytails and the whole thing, and very hippie. So I went from a very clean apartment where all the cups and all the plates and everything were matching and into like living in a house with a couple of great friends where there was only one bathroom and the door was left open because you had to, otherwise other people couldn't get in and out of the house. So it was very hippie, and it was epic. Like I really remember so many moments that marked that transition from one life to another, which of course included eventually working at the ashram and jumping into teaching yoga. I taught my first yoga classes, for at least a year without any qualifications. So I had a real imposter syndrome. You and I met probably, a couple of years after that transition, and I was really still in the learning phase and really looked up to you and admired your work and was really blown away by the sort of yoga I was experiencing with you. So it was kind of like I started doing it before I knew how to do it. And so that was an interesting and powerful transition, but one that just hooked me, man. I was all in. I thought I'd found, the best thing since sliced bread in wellness and in health and in the internal journey and in yoga really initially. So, yeah.
I think yoga has this incredible lineage or traditions of how these earliest yogis used physical movement to create states of consciousness. To me, that leap to realize that what a Western mind would say, oh, that looks like exercise, but somehow these ancient people recognize the literally mind altering states that certain types of movement can create. And I mean, I drank that same Kool-Aid after my first yoga class. It was just like, what just happened to my brain, like,
Yeah.
and it was like this insider's secret, like, oh my God, I feel so good. Why isn't everyone doing this?
Mm.
And I mean, what year was that you're talking about?
2005. Yeah.
Right. So I was 10 years earlier, I'm in this world of mostly female students. I'm this weird guy going to yoga classes, and I couldn't really even tell my friends what I was doing because there was no contextual in the mid 90s. There was no reference point for most men what yoga was. And but again, it was my good fortune, my I don't know, destiny, whatever you want to call it, that I had that first taste, and that first taste it's been 50 years,
Amazing. You know
So
what else kind of stands out about the yogi's journey, at least if I imagine myself in those early years, is that they were prefacing internal state over external. And it's simple and obvious, right? We hear things like money doesn't buy happiness and this and that, and it's over and over again. But yogis were just like, no, it's all about how you're feeling, and it's all about your internal state of consciousness and conflict, and whether you feel peaceful or at ease or craving or the whole thing. And they were just really clear on that. And I can imagine them just trying all sorts of things because yoga is so creative, in the ways that it goes about shifting internal state, and it's clear and it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's also open to interpretation, like so many different ways to stand on a yoga mat, so many different practices to embody, let's call it. And they seem to all be moving in the same direction towards this deeper quality of wellness, this deeper quality of balance mentally, physically, and if you're aligned spiritually, yeah, even spiritually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things I love about yoga is the kind of layers of moving into subtlety, and how once you kind of get that trick, you're like, oh God, any moment, any movement of awareness can drop you deeper into that subtlety from the thing you put in your mouth to the thing you feel under your feet.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the aha moment for me was when the true feeling of softness awakened in me. Like instead of numbness or, like inability to feel, there was a moment where softness was rich. It created an awareness of something that I only thought was theory, which is space. And that term space, space cadet, it's got a kind of a negative connotation. And of course, when you're in the earliest days when I would get interviewed by a radio station or, even a local TV news station, and it was always about, hey, do you contemplate your navel? There was always a little bit of a dig, like at the space cadets. And, you take all that with a grain of salt. I didn't really know how to answer those questions back in those days, but now I do. Like, yeah, that's guilty as charged. I am a space traveler,
Totally. Love contemplating my navel.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, not contemplating my navel so much, but what really drew me to yoga was that it got me to ask questions that I never asked myself. Before I got into the practice, I kind of just did what I was told and moved the way I was supposed to. And I was lucky to have a teacher in Miami that when you were in Shavasana, she would ask you, like, what do you want from your life? What is your intuition asking you for? Like, who do you want to be? And I don't know, they seem like simple questions, but they were questions that I never asked myself. I just followed what I was expected it to be. So that was, aside from feeling good in the body and mind, that was like, whoa, destroying everything I thought I knew and creating something completely new.
It's interesting. Society doesn't really turn us inwards naturally, does it? You really need a space or a teacher or somebody to do that for you.
Well, this is the perfect segue, I think, into talking too about the power of retreats, and especially, you've had now these, what do you call them, like landmark experiences of the top retreat spaces. I mean, the farm in LA was like world renowned. And so you had ground zero there. And then you went to Esalen, which is, I think, the first time we met at Esalen. And that's ground zero as well in Northern California. And then you're in Aroha in South Island of New Zealand. So I don't know what that is. You have some kind of karmic path to all these incredible retreat spaces. I'm just curious, how did that happen for you?
And I feel so lucky, actually. When I came to the ashram in Los Angeles, I really had no sense that a place like that even existed. I certainly had no clue about Esalen. I was in Tucson for a period of time, and so Canyon Ranch was there and Miraval were there, but those places don't quite have the same depth, and I still hadn't visited them. So I attribute a lot of that luck to my friend Chalo, actually, who was an absolute flame of creativity and really a shooting star. He's actually sadly passed away not too long ago, but he threw caution to the wind constantly in his life. Like that would have just been his way of being. And so he didn't care about many of the things that others cared about, including myself. And so he just found himself following adventure and found himself in these amazing retreat spaces and convinced people to let him lead retreats. And luckily I was his friend, so there was a lot of serendipity and luck in that. And I'm so grateful. The first week that I spent at the ashram was an absolute lightning bolt. By about day 3 out of 7, there was no turning back. I was 110% in. Yeah, it was clear. When you're searching, and you haven't found it, and all of a sudden you find it, it's incredibly incredible how powerful that experience is. I still remember a lot of small moments in that retreat of very subtle things, like coming back to my bed after the day, and there would be like a little heart crystal on my pillow, and like bursting into tears. just the love and the care, and like, like I just had never been in a space like that. And so beautiful. It's in a world like this where sometimes it feels like it's you against all of it, to be in a space where you're cared for and held and loved and nurtured, and to feel your body reviving and feeling vibrancy, and to feel your mind stilling, and coming home to a little more self is an amazing gift. So for me, that's been my path. Like once I had that experience, I was like, oh, because I had been doing yoga, but yoga hadn't gotten me to where retreats had gotten me. And so there was something about that immersion with intensity and duration, and that mix of kind of holding my feet in the fire and just doing the work and waking up early and, practicing through the day, that was absolute magic. So yeah,
How did you transition to Esalen? What I don't know if I ever heard that story.
Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
I went there for their work scholar program. Actually, I went there to study permaculture the very first time. Oh, sorry, that was my second time I went up. First time was a short visit and just loved it. Had the classic Esalen nudity experience where I had to face that interesting teacher. And then came back for a couple of months to study permaculture. And then I've been coming back since then, but that was the main attraction, was permaculture. And it's why, Aroha is permaculture design. So at the very beginning of this process, we sat down with the architects and the ESC engineers and this whole design team that had been amassed to design this place. And I had permaculturists lead the first design charrette. And so when you look around here, you can really see, the zones of permaculture and the way things are laid out in order to provide the most efficient solution for just providing for basic human needs. So that was really, really impactful. And the community, the fact that I'm here at Aroha right now, and my baby is, just a few, 50 meters away from here. And so the community aspect, even the work scholar aspect, there were so many things that came from Esalen that are here as well.
What's the nudity thing though? Okay. What is that?
Oh, have you not
As an
been?
exercise?
Oh, you got to go.
No.
You got to go. It's the best thing. And even once you kind of got it, you still just to sit there and watch it is quite fun. So Esalen has these beautiful thermal hot springs, which are sitting perched on a cliffside. And it's a highlight, of course, of being there, is being in these natural thermal spas. And it's clothing optional, but the culture is nude. 95% of people are naked, and the 5% are new to Esalen. So
Exactly.
so you can sit.
Haven't quite stepped over that edge yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. I mean, it's like, it's grandmothers and children and if you have any hangups around your body or just being naked, which I think almost everyone does in the Western culture, I certainly did, you're just kind of time after time, you're leaning into that comfortability of being naked and it's awesome. By the end, you've got it. You're like, oh yeah, just a body, so.
I have, a story I want to share here because I think it's perfect. When my daughter was 6 months old, got invited to teach at Esalen, and so we took my daughter, 6 months old, and my wife, and the daughter who's 6 months old has no trouble with nudity, and just loving the pools. And we would obviously be in some of the cooler pools so that the baby could kind of hang out. But she grew up there. I taught annually for 10 years or so. And she grew up there, at least a weekend or a week program a year, attending gazebo school, and feeling right up until she was like 15, she was comfortable getting naked and just being in Esalen. But then, they hit that kind of mid-teenage years, and then there's this self-consciousness that, and to this day, she hasn't really been back there in that capacity. But it was just fantastic for us to have our daughter grow up with that, and to look at the pictures now and see that that was so much a part of her life. That even the gazebo school, which just had this connection to nature that she wasn't getting in public schools. And she loved going to school on her vacation, but it was gazebo.
I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. That looks like such a cool school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and what a gift to your child to give them even a taste of, because I would guess her transition at whatever point she, comes to that will just be easier,
For sure.
and no
She's
need to force it.
she definitely identifies right now with modern culture, but I see she loves to go camping. She loves Big Sur. She just about every weekend she's going up there. So I think it's deeply embedded.
Hmm.
When you made the move to New Zealand, was it to start Aroha, or was there some other call to New Zealand?
Yeah, yeah, it was actually to start. So I had already started a business in the States called Chrysalis Retreats. And so the Adventures in Wellbeing sort of tagline was a vision to create more variety in the retreat space and to take people on adventures to different locations. But what I learned was that every time you go somewhere new, there's a lot of overhead to creating a retreat in a unique space to do it well. And so we eventually kind of dropped into two different locations. We were running retreats in an incredible earthship in Taos, New Mexico, and then in another great retreat space there in Ojai. And I met my now business partner who was coming as a guest on retreat, and he really had drank the Kool-Aid like we have and was looking for something to do. He had made enough money in his life and had come to the realization that we were just kind of speaking of, that yoga can often lead you to, that there was something else that was important there. And so he was in the process of pulling out of his professional life and really looking to gift and support something of more meaning and depth for him and his family. So that was the partnership. He was living in Zurich. We met there in Zurich and had a lunch, and Aroha was born out of me sharing a vision, which was basically that I just hadn't really seen something that was really thoroughly thought through from inception, designed and built to embody holistic well-being, from the water sources to the waste management, all the way through to the practices and the program. And so that was the initial pitch. It wasn't even a pitch, it was just a conversation over lunch. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And neither one of us had ever been to New Zealand. We knew very little other than what we'd heard in our travels. And he came down, absolutely loved it, and sent me down. And within that second trip, we both said, okay, like, we'll find something here. Let's commit. And then about a 6-month process unfolded, just looking at a lot of real estate and traveling around the country and really thinking about what was important. And it's a strange amount of pressure, to find the right thing. You have the chance, you've been given the keys to your dream, like, go do it. And it's like, oh God, like, what exactly is it? And will I know if I find it? And what is most important? That was a really cool process to go through. And eventually we found this place. I would say, if it wasn't for Chris, there are certain parts of me that we might have ended up somewhere else, because my values and his values came together and really found this property and fell in love with it. And then we went through the whole process of design and build. So it was about a 4-year from beginning to opening. So yeah.
So you've got this magical venue on a magical piece of property. And I know that I'm an architect as well. So, like, in terms of destiny or luck, to meet you and then meet you again in New Zealand at the place that you're at, with using architects that I know personally who are extremely talented people. and to have that experience from my point of view as a teacher and as an architect, that's one thing. But for the guests, how do you communicate? You know, maybe it's just your market, but you tell me, how do you communicate to people how special it is? Because, we've got the luxury of 60 minutes to talk to people. You usually probably have 3 minutes or, like a sound bite to convince people. Do you find that challenging sometimes?
I think it is tricky. I mean, I don't know that any of us have ever had a marketing experience where we've been shown some photos or gone to a website or looked at an Instagram page that accurately, fully depicts what an experience can be. And especially in the world where we work, there are no words that can really point to the experience. And there are certainly no photos that can capture the whole thing. So we work at it. We definitely have a team that are passionate about it, and we continue to learn, and we just continue to do our best. But I still get people frequently that show up and go, we didn't realize this is what this was. Like, this is well beyond your website kind of thing. So it's hard work. I guess one thing that we do intentionally is we say less. So we don't give a lot of detail on the website as to what they're going to move through in terms of an arc of experience, because it seems to be that our minds, when we're kind of off in our other world, can just kind of fixate on little pieces, and we might miss the grander experience just because there's no coffee. And it's like, I can't live without coffee. Or there's no steak, I can't live without steak, or whatever it is. The mind will just kind of attach to it. So we're quite vague intentionally around that. And then we often ask the question, or I ask the question of my team, when we're putting something out, I kind of ask the question of like, how is this going to change their life? And just make sure you state or phrase things in terms of essentially what's in it for me. And it sounds kind of selfish, but I think whether conscious or unconscious, our minds are kind of wondering, what am I going to get out of this? How is this really going to shift my experience? So we tend to speak through that lens. And things like, for example, we've spent, 25% of our budget on things you can't see or touch or taste. Sustainability, like how do we produce our energy and how do we deal with our waste, and all of these kind of functional aspects of the retreat center. And what I've learned is like, it's not clear enough. It's not enough. It's not personal enough for people. And so actually as a point of sale, sure, you might say eco retreat or something like that, but people don't click on the button to like learn more about where our energy comes from or things of that sort, And so I think if you just look at our website, you kind of see it's just quite clearly kind of procedural on like what's your experience going to be and how do you get here, and just kind of the real basics. So that's kind of what we learned.
So what do you offer them? Like, why should they go to a retreat at Aroha?
Yeah. It's great. It's a great question. I think
There's no answer, really. It's just the question, right? Everything's unique. I'm curious. Like, tell
I
me.
mean, we call it the arc of Aroha, which is that nothing is accidental and everything's intentional. And very much like yoga, if you look at the 8 limbs of yoga, you've got the yamas and the niyamas, which are these observances, and they're kind of your starter package. With yoga is like, have a look at these things, have a look at honesty, and have a look at cleanliness, and have a look at truthfulness, and all of these things. And so Aroha has a little bit of you arrive and you do certain things, and then you're just guided through an arc that builds piece by piece through a peak through the middle. And then we kind of have a day of kind of stabilizing after that and landing and putting our feet back on the ground, and then you're away. So that arc includes everything from just moving your body and getting physical and sweating and finding that inner fire, all the way through to more potent practices like silence and fasting and meditation and things that I think if you don't prepare the mind and body well for, people have a harder time with. But, if I make you hike really big mountains first, you're a little more grateful for not hiking. So that's kind of the fun of it.
Let's
we
meditate.
yeah, totally. All of a sudden you're like sitting inside. Yeah, that sounds great. So it's an art. It's super fun. And any experience that we ever have, and you would find this in your retreats and in your programs, is that it's like the whole thing is a playground, and we get to craft what we think will be most impactful and most powerful. And so it's really cool to have a teacher like you come, and it looks like we're going to do this again, which is really exciting, because it's a whole nother flavor, and it enriches what we're already doing. And I think there's an incredible synergy. You've got, like, when you come to Aroha, there's a team of 46 of us, and there's a max of 20 guests. So it's like 2-to-1 sort of support in your journey. And there's, I'd say, a lot of depth and a lot of potential and a lot of synergy that comes from that sort of nurturing. And, if we do our jobs well, people can have really powerful experiences.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I more common than not, and the reason this is so potent for me right now is, hang on a second. That was my wife. She had something for me to do here, I'm sure, because she had that look. But we're good. Um, I find in preparation for hosting a retreat, or being part of a team that's hosting a retreat, that I'm asked this question: what's in it for the guests? And so, when I ponder that, and the honest truth for me is, and I've said this more often than not, my role as a retreat leader is to create a space to hold whatever process you want to discover, whatever you're curious to do. And the type of movement that I teach teaches you how to connect with that spaciousness. And part of it has to do with the venue. I'm very selective about my venues. And of course, Aroha is right at the top of my list. And ever since I moved back to the States from New Zealand, I spend at least 2 or 3 days a month thinking, how am I going to get back to Aroha? I'm just being frank with you, because I just feel such a connection to you, to the space, and it's the perfect container for curiosity or exploration. You can move in whatever channel, silo, whatever you want to call it, but there's opportunities to blow all of that up, to just surrender to this spaciousness. And, Aroha is a place that has this incredible night sky, this incredible lake, these incredible mountains, the incredible facilities. It's easy. It's easy. But my role is just to hold space for whatever unfolds.
Yeah. It's funny. I know that we intentionally, probably both of us, stay away from some of the maybe more spiritual language, just so that we don't load people's intentions. But I had a really great feedback on the last retreat. So somebody was sitting in the closing circle, and they said, the rainbows have always been there, but now I see them. And it's moments like that where I'm just like, it's like the best of the best. It's like, it's the reason why I do everything I do. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
fantastic.
Mm.
I want to take it back to your inner teacher real quick, because the inner teacher is something that we always have within us since birth or eternally, whatever you subscribe to. But I think the path is learning to unlearn so that you can fully express it in the physical, like in your journey of life. So at one point in your life, what was the point that your inner teacher really spoke and you gave it the space to fully express itself?
It's a great question. I think my experience in terms of, inner teacher is that there is a part of me that is always there, holding my whole experience, presence, consciousness. It's kind of this essential witnessing that really needs nothing, right? It doesn't need to learn. It doesn't need to grow. It doesn't need to achieve anything. It is whole, complete, peaceful presence. Yeah. And when I'm there, I have everything, And then there are parts of me that want to achieve. It's like, yeah, sure. Maybe if I practiced for long enough, I could just sit here and be in equanimity and sit on a pillow. And there would be great value to that. But there are also these kind of little bits in there that are like, oh, but what if we did this? And, how about we go out and do that? And what I notice in those parts is that some of them are quite healthy. Some of them are balanced. Some of them go about my achieving and my connecting and my doing and my organizing and my dreaming and my creation processes, whatever those are, in a way that feels, beneficial, feels like that even in the process of the creating, it's all good. And then I have as many, if not more, parts inside me that do it out of places that are missing something, that are striving because there's a hole, striving because it's not enough, or they're not enough, or I'm not enough, or my family's not enough, or the business isn't enough, or there are that's probably a more common experience for me, that I'm moving and achieving, and there's some subtle sense of striving that creates a little discomfort inside me. And so I feel like my work, my spiritual work, is noticing when those parts are coming up, noticing that discomfort, that knot in my stomach, or that tightness around my heart, and just tuning in to that and kind of going, oh, what is it? What is it that you need me to know? And shifting, hopefully learning something, unburdening something, doing some sort of work in there that kind of reminds me of that essential quality, and then has me kind of reconnect with my doing, with my creating, with my teaching, with my sharing, that is more centered, that is more balanced. And sometimes people ask about like intuition, and I'm like, what is my experience of intuition? Because that's a little bit like the inner teacher as well, and it's all one, but it's also, there are like separate aspects of it. So I feel like I'm most in connection with intuition, and most in connection with that, if we want to call it inner teacher, or the kind of guidance, the inner guidance that kind of brings insight. I'm most in connection with that when I'm most still and most effortless and most open. So for me, that's where that comes from. If the thinking mind is like, oh, I don't know about this person, they don't seem safe, or, something like that, usually if I stand back a little bit, there's some part there that has something that it's learned somewhere, and it's kind of projecting it out onto whatever's going on. Yeah. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that.
Crystal or me?
Crystal, why don't you start that one? Yeah, both, really.
I have a good one. Go ahead, Crystal.
Okay.
I mean, which the part about sensing other people and then projecting learned behaviors onto them?
You could start there. I was interested in your inner teacher and your experience of how
my
that
inner teacher
shows up for you.
It's like it's coming out of the mud. Like it's always been there, but I've kind of just shut it up because like I said before, just wanting to do what's expected, validation, being liked, fear of being misunderstood, not being liked, being ridiculed, things like that. There's some bullying in my childhood. So I think that's, when you're a kid, and I think that's when your inner teacher really shines, and you're just like ready to show the world who you are. And anything that happens around that makes you feel like you need to shut down and protect yourself kind of creates these walls around that inner teacher. Like it's not safe, like you were saying. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's just maturing. It's just getting older. It's just stepping into this, I don't give a fuck anymore what other people think or what other people expect. And it's not coming from a place of arrogance. It's coming from a place of how much time do we have on this earth? And how do I want to spend it? Do I want to spend it fully expressing who I am and knowing that when I go to the other side, like I lived and I showed up as me, as this piece of the whole that is, that can only come through me.
Love that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you too.
My path was, again, maybe like Crystal, having these experiences as a child of feeling, the middle child syndrome of being the black sheep, or whatever you want to call it, my awareness was different than the context of my family. And I stood out among my two siblings, one older, one younger. From a very early age, I could see things before they happened, or I could see things and then I went about creating that. So there was that kind of ability to see some clearness of an event or a project or whatever it is, and then it manifests, or I would manifest it. And I didn't know what it was. I just thought that was life. And I was always taught, to have a plan. If you only have one plan, you need three plans, plan A, plan B, plan C. As an adult, I started to see things happening, but they didn't happen in the way that I envisioned them until hindsight looked back on them. And hindsight started to fine tune my ability to connect with intuition. Like, I say this in my book, like intuition in some ways is like humor. It's never 100%, and with practice, you get this awareness, let's call it, and the delivery, like humor, a lot of it is timing and how you pause or how you leave gaps and kind of let silence kind of fill the auditorium, so to speak, before you're hit with the punchline. And intuition, I have that same sense about it, that sometimes I intuit something, like, for instance, this podcast, for instance. I didn't envision the podcast, but I did envision an Inner Teacher Academy. And then when Crystal, this was a year ago, when Crystal and Israel contacted me 6 months ago, and they started talking about my book and about Inner Teacher, and they want to do a podcast. Oh, that's the piece, that's how this all starts to connect and manifest. So that part of intuition, it's almost like it starts the flow of something, and then there's some divine, I don't know if it's divine though. This is the hard part. You commit to that intuition, and then universe either supports it in the moment or it discourages it in the moment, but it may bring it back. You're just not ready for it yet. And 12 months ago, I wasn't ready for Inner Teacher Academy. Now I'm ready. I mean, the podcast has introduced me to a whole community of these unique thinkers, these unique voices, these fellow travelers on this path towards the inner teacher. And I'm loving it. I'm loving having a community instead of being the outlier. I feel like this community is starting to orbit around this concept, this idea of inward development.
Hey, Peter, I'm interested. The part you said about when you were a little boy and you could
Yeah.
see things. Do you still, have you been able to keep that alive? Oh, amazing. Wow, that's cool. Because I have memories, you were sparking in me of being a young boy and having almost like supernatural powers, or certainly believing I did, like that I could move mountains and that things were just like, it was a different world. There was like still, these memories are kind of in the single digit sort of years, and it was probably like, I imagine like when you're really young, you're like, you're part in both worlds sort of thing, and really
Funny.
you can create mountains, and then
It's funny that you're saying this because when I was in the single digit years, my most recurring dream was the ability to fly.
yeah.
And this is going to date me a little bit, but there was this sitcom on television called The Flying Nun. And did you remember this show?
Yeah.
And she had these kind of the hat that just kind of lifted her up. And that's how my dreams were like. I had this hat thing that just kind of lifted me up. Now, it wasn't until my wife enrolled for a graduate degree at the Younging Institute of Pacifica in Santa Barbara that I start to get all this dream analysis of what flying dreams mean. And, I feel like the flying dreams for me was this creativity, this kind of connection to some, again, is it divine? I mean, I think there is an element of divine. there's just a connection to creativity. I notice as an adult that, especially during the COVID years, I could balance mental health challenges, because we all had mental health challenges during COVID, I would believe, myself included. As long as that creative spark was alive in me, creating whatever, it was sometimes in the garden, sometimes a little construction project, whatever it was, that there was a balance, that there was yeah, it's almost homeostasis is the word I was looking for. There's a homeostasis in me, my awareness of the physical and the psychological. And I was listening to you, Damian, talk about that your child is in the just 50 feet down the hallway. And I realized too that as clear as I have been about how I speak and how I move and how I serve people, it wasn't until I had a child, and I know you're in that fantastic early year phase, which I wanted to last forever, but then the teenage years comes, and the teenage years with a teenage girl is probably one of the karmas that I don't necessarily wish on any man, except she has taken me to levels of awareness that I could have just glossed over, and especially the subconscious stuff. And so now inner teacher, it would appear to me that many times people show up in your life, and if it's a child, even better, to give you room to expand, expand into other ways of seeing things. And it's a useful tool in the world that we're living in right now. You hopefully share the same feeling, maybe, that the appearances are never what they seem to be, ever. And how do we, getting back to this hold space, how do we hold space to see where we connect? Literally, it's I don't see a way out of this current situation unless we learn how to connect with people that we agree with or people that we don't agree with. We have to find some commonality. And I don't know.
I think
Go
you're
ahead.
kind of touching on something which is for me kind of interesting, which is that there is the micro and the macro. Like I have my relationship with my daughter, and sometimes she's delightful and cooing, and I was just the most incredible human ever. And sometimes she's struggling and she's crying and she's upset. And sometimes she's of the age now where she can actually be upset with me. At first it was just upset, but now it can be pointed at me, And and
Just
so
wait.
I'm sure I can only imagine. And then there's kind of all the way out to the macro. We have our relationships, we have our communities and the struggles in those communities. And now, certainly in the moments we're in now, you really can see the macro geopolitical forces moving, in a way that we've probably never seen. And so it's a neat question. Like, how do you move in these days and times in all of these circles, And one thing I notice with my daughter, and I think we can apply this to the macro as well, is that I can just very easily stay. My wife and I took a 3-day break recently. We went over to Wanaka and took the caravan over there, and there's all the organizing of the trip and the packing and the doing this and the doing that and planning and buying tickets and yada yada. And it was only on the second day I had some time with Mila, my daughter, and we were walking along this beautiful lake, and I happened to sit down, and the light was just right coming through the trees, and it was just the right space. The water was gently lapping on the shore, and I became aware of these layers of me that even when I'm just walking with my daughter, there's like the caretaking layers and the what's next layers and all of these kind of doingnesses inside me. And in that moment I was able just to kind of go and relax all of that, and she and I had the most magic moments just sitting there doing nothing, going nowhere. And it was a highlight of the entire weekend. It wasn't the most high adrenaline aspect of the whole thing. In fact, quite the opposite. But that these portals exist always, and that my relationship to my daughter and to fathering and to, my romantic relationship and my wife and my extended family, like all of these can so easily have like a little frictional layer as though we're trying to drive them somewhere or change them in some way. And I think this goes for the macro as well. It's like the economy's tanking or the government's doing something you don't like or whatever it is. Or maybe the government's doing something you love, and you feel some sort of, attack on the government that you love so much, or whatever it is. I still think those frictional layers can be there, and that you and I are the only ones that can ultimately soften, and I love that word that you use, soften, can soften in a way that resolves that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I just came back from India, 3 weeks in India, and then just on the way home, I stopped in Amsterdam and taught in this little town called Utrecht. So I had these polarity in terms of societies going from the Ganges in the Rishikesh and then dropping into this medieval town in Europe, very modern and efficient, and the political spectrum, there was so much polarity there. And so as a traveler, like I'm dropping into communities that I'm not familiar with and having conversations with people I'm meeting for the first time, and even some people that I've known for years but haven't actually been in their house for 3 days ever, where we had time to just have conversations. And I found myself, like empathetic to everyone's point of view on both polarities of the global situation. And it was so clear to me that the place of equanimity, I think, is the closest word that I can think of, that I see the importance of conversation. I see the importance of connection, and how do I connect with someone that I disagree with? And I don't have an answer to that question. It just happens in the moment. And I ask myself, what is true in this situation? And with the people that I know, it's a deep fondness for who this person is, because I've known them for years. And yet we differ on some minutia. We differ on, is the world coming to an end? Uh, you know, it's going to come to an end for all of us at some point, but right now, I think it's safe to say it's not coming to an end just quite yet. What I'm trying to say here is relationship, connection, truthfulness. These are all qualities that we hopefully all aspire to. And that's what keeps me waking up in the morning. That's what keeps joy in my heart, that I have this wherever I go, the ability to be in it. And that's at a level that isn't dealing with paying the landlord or, all these other things that are kind of critical, paying the government taxes, etc. That's a whole nother environment that I have to participate in as well. And that's where I struggle the most, to be honest, especially at this point in my life. Like, I have a hard time keeping up with those other types of more formal commitments to being alive on the planet. I don't have as high a priority for it. But other than that, I'm just feeling deep gratitude for this point in my life. And I look at people like both of you that have achieved success in many levels, but on a personal level, you have open hearts, and you can feel, even on the screen, you can feel the open-heartedness coming through energetically. And that's the ultimate connection, is at the heart space. So,
One
yeah.
thing I was connecting with there is this yogic practice that I'm grateful to have come across just through that path, which is seeing yourself in others, and that thing when you feel polarized of looking across to the other side and just seeing if there's, do you ever feel the way that person's feeling? Or, and the greatest form of that, even when I'm looking at somebody and I'm like, I'm never like that, like I never do that thing. I never take that approach. I kind of go, well, what I can be sure of is that from their perspective, with the information they have and with what they're trying to achieve, they're doing the best they can for what they see as most important, and I certainly can relate to that, and yeah. I agree. You can often find, on just about any topic, you can often find at least some sanity on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. In this very specific instance, when I was in Utrecht, of having a very charged conversation around politics, that charged in terms of the topic, and I didn't consider myself charged because I wasn't fully invested in one decision or the other. And because I wasn't in agreement, there was some frustration and disappointment. And I just took that opportunity to recommit to sharing how much I care for her, like a close friend. I just want you to know that our relationship is intact. Like I still feel as close to you, if not closer, that you've gotten vulnerable with me to kind of share your fears with me, even though I don't share those same fears. I just want you to know that I'm here, that completely diffused the conversation. And it didn't solve anything. It just diffused the intensity of it. And then we had a lovely evening with friends, like just conversation. And that was one of the most powerful things I did on this trip to India and coming home is that moment. It was like you have these extremes in India where you're seeing with your own eyes life, death, decomposing bodies, burning bodies. And then you just find yourself, okay, what is this situation really about right here? It's again that back to the heart connection. We have heart connection. We are a species with hearts. So let's reconnect with that. That's always to me a valuable skill, a valuable tool to have.
It's always interesting to me that in so many different ways, if it just seems to be there is a tendency in us humans that if we don't necessarily agree, like we know that we're not perfect and we're not flawless in our knowledge and that our opinions aren't always right. If you say, "Are you always right?" It's like, no, I'm not always right. And yet, when we come to certain conversations and you disagree with somebody, there's like a little tendency towards feeling as though the other person's the enemy. Even though, when you stand back from that, you go, "Oh yeah, well that's silly too."
Yeah. Yeah. We could probably speak for another couple hours about all of this.
We're going to need a part 2.
Yeah. Yeah. We might have to have you back for sure.
Sounds good. We'll do the next in the sauna, maybe.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope this ended in the fall or in your spring. I hope we can create that. Anyway, thank you so much. Crystal, did you want to close with anything?
No, I just want to say this has been this conversation has been amazing. All the feels. I love that everything that we've shared. We got a little bit vulnerable, which I really like too. And just thank you, Damian, for being here and sharing with us.
Of course. Such a pleasure, you guys. Great to see both of you. And maybe it'll be in the flesh next time. That's our intention.
Yeah, for sure. Presence is golden.
Lots of love to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.